Welcome back to 100 Yards of Football Sports Talk Radio. I'm your producer Jeremiah Long, and joining me to talk about one of the in my head it's controversial because of what he's done for my Vols and what he's done with my Vols or to them in the past. But one of these most legendary coaches and legendary on the field player, Mr. Archie Manning, is not only our original host, Mr. Vincent Turner, but our big man in the chair, an NFL legend and college legend himself, Mr. Harper LaBelle. How's it going, Harper?
Great today. We get to talk about someone that, yes, probably made you very happy because of his son, but he disappointed you in many, many, many different ways if you're a volunteer fan. So mixed emotions in terms of Archie Manning and his legendary status. But we wanted to talk about him today.
Absolutely. And everyone watching, make sure that you go ahead and subscribe to the show. And don't forget to jump over to our podcast. And you can listen to it anywhere that you listen to podcasts, on Spotify, on the YouTube podcast, Apple Podcast, any way that you love to listen to them. We have over 1,300 episodes, and many of those episodes are just like this one where it's evergreen. You can listen anytime you want. It's great history specials, and we are there for you 24/7 with the amount of content we have. So with that, I'll take it back to you, Mr. Harper LaBelle.
Well, thank you, Jeremiah. And folks, on May 19th, 1949, a little town of Drew, Mississippi, about 15 miles east of the Mississippi River, a little bit west of the Black River, there's a town of less than 2,000 people even today. And a little guy was born named Elijah Archibald Manning III. And what a difference he made for that small town in Drew, Mississippi. When you stop to think about it, it's a town that you kind of drive through. Unless, of course, you're going to be visiting the state penitentiary there. There's nothing else in Drew except for a couple of silos. But growing up as a young man in the early 50s, and then obviously in the 60s, when he went into high school, Archie Manning became one of the best athletes from that area that you'd ever want anyone to be at. 6'3", 210, maybe 215 pounds. He had speed, he had strength, he had smarts, and he was also able to do some things in different sports. He ran track, he played basketball, he played football, of course, but as a baseball player, this is where I was fascinated with how good he was. Vincent Archibald Manning was drafted 4 separate times in his baseball career, even though he never suited up and signed a contract for a major league club. This is a guy that was as athletic as anybody that we've spoken about. Now, we'll talk about his college and obviously his pro career, but in high school, his father barely attended any games because of work, but his mom was at every single game. She was a statue in many cases, always attending and providing all the love and encouragement for him. But a fantastic baseball and football player, and ends up going to the University of Mississippi. But Vincent, was there anything that stuck out in your mind other than how good of a baseball player that he was? He had a great football career, obviously, but bring us up to date with Archie Manning and his early rise to athletic fame and fortune.
When you look at a guy, during that time, I was a little guy the age, between the ages of 7 and 10 years old. And everything in my hometown, Memphis, I followed. Memphis basketball, Memphis football. And Ole Miss is only, the campus of Oxford is only like 50 miles from Memphis. So, of course, we got a little coverage of Ole Miss. And then, of course, Tennessee being the state school. And I really heard about Archie Manning when he was a sophomore going to college. But most of all, before he got to college, he was always a legend. And there was rumors that you just mentioned he was so much of a great athlete that he made the varsity baseball team at the age of 13. So before he played that first game in 1968 at Liberty Bowl Stadium in Memphis, Tennessee, I already kind of knew a little bit of him. But that night against Memphis State, Ole Miss won that football game 21-7. But what stuck out to me about Archie Manning, it was no question about it. He was the best player on the field. There was no question about it. It was like he was like a man. playing among boys. He could roll out and throw the ball on a dime. He was fast, Harper. I mean, very quick and fast. And a lot of people think about Eli and Peyton being great quarterbacks. But let me tell you something. Their father, Archie, was just above everybody. I mean, the athletic ability was just amazing. And seeing a guy at that size do a lot of things that wasn't really being done by any quarterback during that time. And then, of course, 6-8, Ole Miss had a decent year. They played in the Liberty Bowl that year against the Jerry Claiborne's Virginia Tech team. I think he passed for 141 yards, 2 touchdowns. But 1969 was the year that it was the 100-year anniversary of college football. A lot of things happened in 69. President Nixon withdrew 25,000 troops from Vietnam. Then we had the great concert at Woodstock, Janis Joplin, and arguably a lot of people saying the greatest guitarist of all time out of Seattle, Washington, the legend Jimi Hendrix. And then 69, Roone Arledge, producer at ABC, came up with a concept. You know what? I want to broadcast the first night college football game ever in the history of college football. I want to go down in the SEC and broadcast a game between a rising star by the name of Archie Manning and a quarterback at Alabama by the name of Scott Hunter. And the thing about that game started late, started about 8:45 Central Standard Time, 9:45 Eastern Standard Time. And Ole Miss came in the game. I think they had lost one game on the year, and Alabama had lost one game. But that's when you really saw how good Archie Manning was. And if I can say anything today, I want every college football fan, every former NFL great, go back and watch that game on Saturday night. Archie Manning put on a show. He had 436 yards passing. He had 104 yards rushing. He had 5 touchdowns that evening. He had almost, I think, 540 yards total offense. That record stood for 43 years until Johnny Manziel broke it at Texas A&M. And watching them play that night, I just want everybody to go back. You could pull it up on YouTube and watch that game. And then after the game, watch Archie Manning, how tired he was, how much he put into that game. And 69 was a special year for Ole Miss. They beat a Georgia team, I believe in Athens, ranked that year, 25-17. And then Archie, the Tennessee fans, in that November afternoon, called Archie who? Because the previous year, the sophomore year, Archie Manning, Ole Miss played Tennessee in Knoxville, and Archie Manning threw 5 interceptions. And going back to that 69 game, Ole Miss was 5-3. Tennessee was 8-0. And the state of Tennessee was just at another level. Doug Dickey's last year. Bottom line, Tennessee was on their way to play for the national championship. Mm-hmm. And at that time, before the Ole Miss game, I remember a lot of people, because the most heavy alumni base in the state of Tennessee is in Memphis, Tennessee. And I remember people saying, oh, we don't know what bowl we're going. We either going to the Orange or Sugar, but one thing for sure, we're going to win the national championship this year. And that was a very talented Tennessee team. They had 2 All-Americans at linebacker, Steve Conner, Jack Hacksaw Reynolds. They had a sophomore by the name of Jackie Walker. They had Lester McLean, Bobby Scott, Kurt Watson. They had young Phil Fulmer, who was a backup on their team at guard. And they went up to Jackson that day in 69. And that morning, I went out to work with my father, Chester. How you doing today, Pops? Because I was so confident I didn't have to stay home and listen to the game. We went out, did that thing. I came back home, ran to the radio, got me a little tuna sandwich made by Mama with a little bit of mayonnaise on it. And then I turned on the radio. It was the third quarter. If you know anything about announcing, to me, who's the greatest all, John Ward at the University of Tennessee. And I remember what he said in the third quarter. Today, the Vols don't have a great game going on, and right now it looks like the Vols are going to go down in the ditch. Let me give you the score right now. It's Ole Miss 31, Tennessee 0. I stood there shocked for a minute. You got to be kidding me. Ole Miss ended up winning that game 38-0. Archie Manning was at another level. Ole Miss jumped on Tennessee so bad, 21-0. They ended the first quarter. The game was never close. And what made it so bad is that Tennessee got shut out. And it really changed the fortune of Tennessee football, because after that, Tennessee was competitive for some years, but that game stuck in the Tennessee craw for a long time. And a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Steve Canner. And one thing he said about that game, forever in his lifetime, is going to stick in his blood. And Archie Manning, in my opinion, became the best football player in America. It was no question about it that he was Archie who. And then at the end of the year, I remember Ole Miss played in the Sugar Bowl against Arkansas, school I attended. Arkansas was coming off a real disappointing loss in that game against Texas, #1 versus #2 up there in Fayetteville, where President Nixon attended. And Arkansas came in as a heavy favorite. They had Bill Montgomery. They had the Texan out of Odessa, Mr. Chuck Dykes. They had the running back, Bill Barnett. And they had the man from Decatur, Georgia, coaching them, Mr. Frank Broyles. And Arkansas came in that football game. It was kind of down. Ole Miss jumped on them. Ended up winning that game 27-22. But Archie Manning was at his best that day. He had over 100 yards passing. He had 2 touchdowns. Was voted the game's MVP. And that 69 season was a season that I've seen a lot of college football players have great seasons in one year, from O.J. Simpson to Tony Dorsett to Herschel Walker. But I put Archie Manning in 69. That season is one of the best individual seasons of any individual football player in college football. Back to you, Harp.
Yeah, I think his college career, I mean, it really was nothing short of amazing. When you stop to think about where Ole Miss had been before, never were they considered to be a top team, a upper tier, and Archie's athleticism, his leadership in terms of his quarterback prowess and his IQ, what a difference. And, you know, how do you lose the game when you throw for 438 yards and you rush for over 100 back in that era when that was just basically unheard of, and still lose to an Alabama team? But single-handedly, can we say that, Vincent, that he single-handedly helped take Ole Miss to a different level?
And when you look at Ole Miss, they had some success in the 60s under Charlie Connolly. They had a quarterback in 55 that was very close to Archie, but was not real as athletic. If a lot of Ole Miss fans that know football, they remember Eagle Day. Very good football player. The 60s, he had some rough years, but you're right. He kind of put Ole Miss football back on the map. But as you just mentioned, Harper, he did it single-handedly. He didn't have great receivers. He didn't have great running backs. It was something that was just really unheard of, because before he came on the scene, a lot of people was talking about the 68 Ohio State Buckeyes. A lot of people talking about Rex Kern, Jack Tatum. But from an individual standpoint, the young man out there that played at USC, O.J. Simpson, had set the college football world on fire. But Archie did it from a standpoint that Ole Miss was not going to win no championships, but he did it from a standpoint of individually, one player carrying the team. And think about this. I hate to bring this up, Harp. It was unheard of, as you just mentioned, a guy to have 436 yards passing in one game and 104 yards rushing and 69 on a major college football stage when the nation is watching a game that was just coming after the Lawrence Welk show. They have over 1 million viewers. Come on, man. It don't get no better than that.
He wins the SEC Most Valuable Player. He wins the Walter Camp Memorial Trophy. He was fourth in the Heisman in 1969 and third in the Heisman in 1970, his senior year. And that was the year that Jim Plunkett ends up winning it. And Jim was the number 1 draft pick out of Stanford, and he goes to the then Boston Patriots, but number 2 overall to the New Orleans Saints. That's where Archie Manning goes. What an amazing group of quarterbacks that came out that year. Ken Anderson. Dan Pastorini was drafted 3rd, and in fact, the Oilers drafted 2 quarterbacks in the first 3 rounds. They needed somebody badly, and they certainly got a great quarterback in Dan Pastorini. But there were so many. Joe Theismann was a part of that draft class. I mentioned Ken Anderson. We could go over that. Just the 71 draft class was amazing. But Archie ends up going to the Saints. And when you stop to think about a team that needed somebody to help set the stage for them that wasn't too far away, so people knew who Archie was, obviously in the Southeast Conference, and he goes to a New Orleans Saints team, and he has a great career for a player that really didn't get to accomplish much because the team around him, they were god-awful, right? I mean, it's unbelievable. Dan Abramowitz is the only guy. We can't even remember who any of the coaches were from the Saints days back then. But Archie ends up sticking it out 1 year after another in 14 years in the NFL. Talk a little bit about what you learned from his NFL experience and his experience there in New Orleans especially.
I think you gain more respect for him because he played in New Orleans for, I think, 10 years, and they never won a playoff game. I think the best record he had in his time was 8-8. And to stay somewhere that long and continuously keep playing, because remember, he got beat up. If you go back and watch a lot of them NFL films, he took a lot of injuries. And you brought up Danny Abramowitz. One thing, I saw an interview with Danny Abramowitz, and he said first time Archie Manning got to the Saints, the first scrimmage they had in training camp, it was very hard to understand Archie because of his Southern dialect. And he said Archie came to the huddle, 48, in that Southern drawl, 48. He said it was something like listen to a battle in the Civil War trying to understand a Confederate general speaking signals at the line of scrimmage. But you got to give Archie more credit. He was voted the NFL Most Valuable Player of the Year award in 7-8, but New Orleans still didn't get to the playoffs. And as you just mentioned, the leadership, the ability to still play in an environment. I remember one game against the LA Rams, Archie talks about how many times he was hit. And he really had a lot of respect for Jack Youngblood because he said Jack Youngblood really went easy on him. Because in that game, I think Archie got sacked at least 7-8 times. But you think about now in the game today, Harper, and you played the game at a high level for 11 great seasons. Would a quarterback stay that long in a franchise and took a beating like that for that long a time? And one thing I love about Archie Manning, even after his playing career, he stayed loyal to that city. See, New Orleans has not had a lot of great things happen to him from an inner city perspective. They've hosted Super Bowls, but the city of New Orleans, if you know what I mean, hasn't been that great. And he's done a lot for the inner city, man. And he's very respected in that city. You think about just him staying there after his playing career. He went on and played with the Oilers and Vikings, but he came back to New Orleans. And think about him staying there and being loyal to that city. He didn't move to, say, Atlanta. He didn't move to California. He didn't move to New York. He just, like a lot of us Southern guys are, we're very comfortable where we're from in the South. And sometimes God has a plan, Harper, even though his career didn't go well. But I remember the great George Lapidus, who was the man of sports in my hometown of Memphis, Tennessee, said this about Archie Manning. A lot of people not going to respect Archie for his pro career. A lot of people are going to say he didn't win nothing. But you see how God kind of revolves that clock. But he said one thing about what Mr. Lapidus said about Archie Manning was that Archie Manning is one of the most classiest guys in America. He's one of the most humble guys that's going to do anything to help people. He's from the state of Mississippi, where that water is strong as far as people helping people, where that water is about survival. That's where my parents are from. Chester and Inez Turner, Morgan Freeman, Brent Favre. I don't have to say no more, do I? B.B. King, some of the greatest ever. Sam Cooke. And you look what Archie Manning has done. He's produced 2 sons, Harper. One of them is in the Hall of Fame, and the other one is going to probably get inducted. 2 sons that's won 4 Super Bowls. And what has he done? Stayed in the spotlight and still been humble. Then he's got a son who's going to be a star at the University of Texas when he get his time, Archie. And what's so great about the story with Archie Manning, as you see with his 2 sons, they don't have a picture of his son Cooper there, who's the jokester of the group, the oldest Manning. But he was the best athlete. Went to Ole Miss as one of the top wide receivers in the country, couldn't play because of a medical condition. Let's be honest, Hop. The guy's got an all-American family, man. But he did it the right way. And on this video today, the one point that I'm going to respect about Archie Manning, he's a very humble guy. Back to you, Hop.
Well, the one story that I have is concerning about Dick Butkus, and Dick gets into the backfield and sacks Archie, and they were friends. They had met each other and known each other for a while through different experiences, obviously, in the NFL and the Pro Bowl and everything. And Butkus sacks Archie. The ball is given back to the referee, and Dick would not pick a guy up, but he stood over Archie, and while he's getting up, Butkus says, "Hey, Arch, how's it going?" He goes, "I'm doing all right, Dick. How are you?" So Butkus says, "You know, I'm coming back." And Archie goes, "Yeah, I know. I'll see you in a minute." The way that Archie kind of dealt with the fact that nobody could block for him. He had to run for his life just about on every play. And he still tried. Remember, the Saints fans were wearing bags over their head that had teardrops that were being drawn on the bag, the Aints. So tough times there in New Orleans. The team wasn't very good, but Archie was the leader of that team. Someone had to lead him, and he did the best job that he possibly could. You mentioned his 3 sons and now a grandson. So the matriarchy there of the family, and Miss Olivia, his wife, who we met, by the way, while he was at Ole Miss, just adding to the legacy of a guy that you never hear much about him. They include Dad, but it's not him talking about it. They have to bring him in. He lets them be whoever they are. And Peyton obviously has never met a camera that he does not like. He will say something to somebody. It doesn't matter who it is. And Eli has a great career. Cooper, of course, you mentioned, and he was the best athlete of all of them. All 3 of his kids were great around the game of football, but it all started with Archie. And I think his pulling away from coaching them and being a part of their life, and more than just, I support you, I'm gonna love you, I'll take you to wherever you need to be, but I am not your helicopter dad. I'm not that deeply involved with everything that you do. I think that it helps to the legacy. So obviously a tremendous individual, and we are so honored to get to talk about him here today on 100 Yards of Football. Final thoughts, Vincent?
When you think about college football, you think about all the great players who's played this game, you better include Archie Manning in that list, at least in your top 10. And you think about the career that he's had as a player, as playing in the National Football League, but most of all, you got to think about this about Archie Manning. Remember, the reason that I bring up the 69 season, that year previously, that summer, his father committed suicide. He was the only son. He only has one other sister, and he found his father. And he thought about not playing in 1969. He thought about quitting school, going back, supporting his mother and his sister. But his mother convinced him, you need to finish this journey. And I just think about that situation. Me being 64 years old and me going to the University of Arkansas, going into my junior year in 1980. What would have happened if I would have came back to Memphis, Tennessee and found my father who had committed suicide? I can tell you right now, at 20 years old, I probably couldn't survive that. I want everybody to think about that. He found his father who had committed suicide in 1969. And then he went on and had one of the best seasons of any individual football player in 69. He went on, got drafted 4 times, playing baseball at Ole Miss. He went on, became a first-round pick in 1971 in NFL draft. He went on, retired from the game, became a mentor. He produced 2 sons that's won 4 Super Bowls. And probably both of them are going to be in the Hall of Fame. It can't get known. You can't put more respect on that. That's a special individual, man. Whether you're white, black, green, or yellow. That's why God takes care of people. When you think about Archie Manning, you better think about the Moses from the state of Mississippi. Back to you, Harper.
He was an All-American third-teamer in 1969. He was a first-team All-SEC in 69 and 70. His number 18 has been retired at the University of Mississippi. In fact, there are speed limit signs that say you cannot go faster than 18 miles an hour if you drive in certain spots there on their campus. He was a New Orleans Saint. He was a Houston Oiler. He was a Minnesota Vikings during his 14-year NFL career. He had 3,600 passing attempts. He completed a little over 2,000. He had 125 touchdowns in the National Football League. His College Football Hall of Fame still stands. He was inducted in 1989, and he is certainly one of the great players, not only while he was playing, but what he did afterwards in terms of his love for the community and his ability to help raise money for causes that are absolutely vital to him. We congratulate him on a fantastic career. So we spent a little bit longer than normal on Archie Manning. We wanted to say thank you for tuning in and being a part of it. We hope you enjoyed the show today. At 100 Yards of Football, we want to honor some of the legends that are a part of the college and the pro game. And in this case, Archie Manning was a little bit of both. So we want to thank you for tuning in. For Vincent Turner, our host and founder, for Logan Landers, our producer and engineer, I'm Harper LaBelle. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Have a fantastic day.